This Christopher Nolan Odyssey scandal and backlash has exploded online, and what it's really exposing is just so wild. Explosive diarrhea is now sweeping across the country, and no one knows where it's coming from. You've got new evidence coming out in the death of Nolan Wells, with video hinting at heated arguments, and the lawyer for his family saying someone deleted messages on his phone. And his grand Platner is now dropped out, and you've got the left scrambling. Donald Trump might actually be an unlikely Platner ally. We're talking about all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. American culture warriors, they have found yet another Hollywood blockbuster to sink their teeth into, right? And this time, it's Christopher Nolan's highly anticipated adaptation of the ancient Greek epic, the Odyssey.
Oh, good Lord. Have you not tell me you haven't read the Odyssey without telling me that you haven't read the Odyssey.
I don't know of any black people that lived in ancient Greece. I just don't.
Apparently the casting was made by Christopher Nolan's woke, libtard wife.
Along with the modern mandates of feminism, transgenderism, and anti-whiteism.
Every time I take a little break from doing my job, I forget what big fucking losers these people are. But I get it. They got to do their time in the culture war mines while their president just fucks up the entire country. Right? Jangle those keys to keep the people's eyes off the ball. But right off the bat, I'll say Christopher Nolan is an unusual target for the conservative culture warriors out there. Because of all the adjectives that one might use to describe him, woke, usually not anywhere near the top of that list. In fact, if anything, he's been criticized for not being woke enough, if we're just gonna keep using this stupid word. Are you at Esquire pointing out that Oppenheimer was accused of flattening its female characters? Dunkirk, it was called out for erasing Indian and African soldiers from the screen. And The Dark Knight, it raised some eyebrows for casting Liam Neeson as the North African villain. And yet when the first trailer for the Odyssey dropped, it was dislike bombed and littered with comments saying stuff like, if I saw this on a plane, I'd still walk out, and I'm looking forward to missing it. And so as far as, what the fuss is all about, if you hear them out, the critics have a number of different objections. And so let's start with the kind of nerdier stuff. First, some took issue with the way Agamemnon's armor looks black and shiny, almost like it's modeled off the batsuit from Nolan's Dark Knight films.
The cheap looking armor in the beginning, which looks like it was created with a 3D printer. Put aside the fact, for now, that they didn't actually have armor that looked like this back in the Bronze Age.
But with that, you had Nolan defending the aesthetic, saying in an interview with Time magazine, there are Mycenaean daggers that are black and bronze. Saying the theory is they probably could have blackened bronze in those days. You take bronze, you add more gold and silver to it, and then use sulfur. With Agamemnon, Ellen, or costume designer, is trying to communicate how elevated he is relative to everyone else. You do that through materials that would be very expensive. And so that was just one small detail, but much more noticeable is the choice to use colloquial, modern American English in the dialogue.
It's definitely nothing like the dialogue in the Odyssey. It doesn't sound like people in ancient Greece.
But with that, you had Nolan defending that choice to the Los Angeles Times, saying he wanted language that has emotional, not intellectual meaning to people. And adding I was maybe being naive, it might bite me on the ass, but I wanted an earthy narrative rather than having everyone use artificially elevated speech. But then also for critics, there's still the glaring problem that Nolan didn't even use the real Odyssey. Right? Instead, he relied on the 2017 translation by Emily Wilson, which was the first major translation from a female scholar. And so even before this film was being made, you had conservatives taking issue with her rendering of the epic, claiming that she made it woke, liberal, and feminist. And so for example, the opening lines of the original poem describe Odysseus using an untranslatable ancient Greek adjective meaning something like many-turned. Previous translators have opted for terms like various-minded, skilled in all ways, and the man of twists and turns. But Wilson, she went for a simpler word. Complicated. And so what you saw conservatives do is take that to be demeaning to the male hero, almost like calling him problematic.
The only reason her translation exists is to neutralize the significance of the Odyssey. She wants to destroy the significance of an epic that's unapologetically masculine, because in 2026, men, particularly white men from Europe and their descendants, simply cannot be heroic figures.
But in her defense here, you have Wilson arguing that her translation is faithful to the original Greek and that Odysseus is clearly still a heroic figure in her version. But then also, really, the main thing that's getting people all riled up, it's not the costumes or the writing, it's a lot of the casting. Because this film, it has some big, incredibly expensive cast. Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Charlize Theron, Robert Pattinson, but a few actors, they've caught scrutiny. Such as the rapper Travis Scott, who plays a bard, with Nolan explaining, I cast him because I wanted to nod towards the idea that this story has been handed down as oral poetry, which is analogous to rap. And then there's Lupita Nyong'o playing the Helena Troy, the mythological figure reputed for her beauty, that her face launched 1,000 ships and started the Trojan War. And seemingly, a number of these people, they had issues that ranged from just not thinking that she was attractive to seeming to have an issue with her being a black woman who was born in Kenya.
Not one person on the planet actually thinks that Lupita Nyong'o is the most beautiful woman in the world.
I mean, you might as well make Helen of Troy Chinese. Were there no white actresses available for the role?
But Christopher Nolan he knows that he would be called racist if he gave the most beautiful woman role to a white woman.
You even had Elon Musk firing off on Twitter. I agree that she is beautiful, but casting a black woman to play a white woman in a foundational work of European literature is no more right than casting a white man to play Shaka Zulu. And then you saw the outrage just kind of get bigger and bigger after Nyong'o gave this answer when someone asked her what she would ask Homer, the author of the ancient epic, if he was here today.
I'd be like, so Homer, how do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little you spent with them?
And as soon as that clip got traction, conservatives lost their shit.
Let me tell you why there weren't a lot of female warriors in Homer's time or in any time, including today. That's because scientifically, based on raw data and reality, men are created different than women.
And as far as Lupita's reaction to all this, she declined to even engage, telling reporters, I'm not spending my time thinking of a defense. The criticism will exist whether I engage with it or not. But what you also saw is that others did spend their time making counter-arguments with, for example, one writer saying, the Odyssey is a long-form poem about a myth. It is a long history of being reinterpreted by artists, directors, and translators. Orson Welles cast Eartha Kitt as Helen of Troy back in 1950. Today's critics are culturally illiterate buffoons. Speaking of which, you even had Ben Shapiro pointing out that the film's white actors aren't authentically Greek either.
Matt Damon is playing Odysseus. Matt Damon is of, what, Scotch-Irish extraction or something? He certainly is not Greek. Right? In fact, none of the people in the movie, so far as I'm aware, are Greek.
Though also, for Ben and a number of people, that there was one casting choice that went just too far for them, and that was Elliot Page as a Greek warrior.
This is ridiculous. I'm not Captain Tall over here. I'm 5'9", but I would dwarf Elliot Page because I'm a normal-sized human male.
Sure, little bro. Also, is that in lifts or no? And for context, if you don't know, Page is a transgender man, so the idea that he's playing a character who is supposed to be tough and strong, it rubs a lot of conservatives the wrong way.
The character is male, and they've chosen a fake male who's not in any way heroic. This is why Republicans have still at least a shot in the midterms still.
Though also there, one of the responses you've had from defenders is, hey, let's wait to watch the film. If Page is a good actor and delivers a convincing performance for the character, who cares whether he's trans in real life, right? And people saying, even if he's not tall or super buff in reality, we don't know yet how that comes off on screen, right? What's the full context? So again, you've got people like Elon saying Chris Nolan desecrated Homer and groveled on his knees just to meet the woke rules required to win an Oscar. What a worm. But what I will say is, if you look at the reviews from just normal critics who have actually seen the film, they are glowing. Many saying that it's one of Nolan's best films ever, which is a wild thing to say, and a front runner for Best Picture at the Oscars. You also had Tom Holland, the historian, not the actor, declaring on Twitter, it is by some way the best cinematic adaptation of a Greek myth I have ever seen. To which Elon replied, Tom Holland is such a cuck. Though you then had Holland firing back saying the Odyssey is an amazing film and missing out on seeing it because you think it's woke or whatever is cutting off your nose despite your face, you're lost. And actually, if I can just take a second to be the petty little bitch that I want to be, and Tom Holland's being so nice here, Elon Musk, how are you so successful and literally the richest man on the planet, and yet also the most pathetic, insufferable little bitch? You are a walking advertisement for why abortion should be legal, or at the very least, we should incentivize people to swallow. I guess it's good that you're focused on this for a second instead of trying to inspire a fucking race war. But just like, dear God, hey, how about this? I will invest in just your overly inflated price of SpaceX right now if you promise that the first rocket to Mars, you're on it. And actually, just like back on topic, even Shapiro, he appears to be, to a certain degree, agreeing with Holland.
There's no real indicator from the trailers at this point that the Odyssey is a fundamental betrayal of the storyline. And Nolan does have a gift for being able to strip politics out of his films almost entirely. And I have a feeling that this movie is going to perform really, really well. I just don't think this bleeds over into regular life in the way that so many people in the online world seem to think that it will. But playing this game where I get extremely, extremely upset about the Odyssey before I actually see it, I'm just, meh. And
yeah, Ben's feeling, his prediction that it's going to do well, it's based in fact, right? As soon as tickets went on sale, tickets for IMAX screenings sold out. I mean, websites crashed, scalpers started hawking them for over $1,000. The film's projected to gross up to $200 million globally just during its opening weekend. And that was before all the glowing reviews started pouring in, right? And it's got an unbelievable amount of hype around it for the director, for the cast, for the epic adventure, as well as the $250 million production value. I mean, I've been kicking myself because I didn't get IMAX tickets in time. I thought I had them, but it was actually, I got early tickets for Dune. So that's probably just going to be more beneficial for the movie because I'm going to watch it when it comes out, and then I'm going to get into a later IMAX screening. But hey, time will tell. The future's not guaranteed, and most all of everyone is talking about a fucking movie that no one's watched yet. But hey, in the meantime, let me know your thoughts, opinions, reactions to all this, and also, are you going to see the movie? But then also from that, we've got to talk about a very different kind of backlash that's in the news right now, because it matters if you have a public Instagram account. And it's because now anyone can use your photos and profile to make AI content without you even knowing about it. Right? That's what you've got in the fine print of Meta's new Muse image, which is a media generation model that's now available in the US via the Meta AI app, site, Instagram stories, and on WhatsApp in limited countries. And while there are a lot of tools available in Muse, the one that's been getting the most attention is the ability to mention a public Instagram account in Meta AI and generate images based on that user's profile. And with that, you have the platform's Help Center explaining, if you have a public account, other Instagram users may be able to create new reels, posts, or stories that reuse part or all of your published photos, videos, or reels. In addition, people may be able to create content with your Instagram content using AI features at Meta. And that, depending on the settings of the other user, this means your reused content may be discoverable in search engine results. One of the biggest things here is that users like you were opted into this automatically, and reports also say that if someone does use your profile to make AI content, you wouldn't be notified about it. Now, you also had Meta explaining in a statement that accounts belong to users under 18. Those are automatically excluded, and also saying that users can opt out in their settings. But then also, it puts the work on you, the user, to know that this is happening in the first place and switch the settings yourself, which means tons of people, their accounts are just blindly exposed to this. And so online, you saw no shortage of people slamming this as just a massive invasion of privacy. And you're also seeing things like a director at a tech justice nonprofit telling the BBC that this is a recipe for disaster, noting we've already seen a catalog of harms from non-consensual AI-altered images on social platforms just in the past year, and adding it is hard to see why Mark Zuckerberg thinks facilitating yet more of this creepy image manipulation is a good idea. And you then also had CAA, one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood that represents some of the most famous people in the world, condemning this in a statement, arguing no one's name, image, likeness, voice, or creative work should be used by any third party, including AI models, without clear documented consent, saying we call on Meta to make protection the default on Muse image, not the exception. Artists deserve to decide if and how their likeness and work is used with consent and the ability to set their own terms. The future of creativity depends on respecting the ownership and autonomy of those who make it possible. Right, but in the meantime, if you are someone that you're freaked out about this, you want to opt out, here's what you can do. One, if your account's set to private, no one can reuse your content, so that's one way, of getting out of this. Or if you want to keep your account public but still opt out of this, you can go to Instagram settings and find the sharing and reuse page. Then under the allow people to create with and reuse your content, toggle both posts and reels off. Then under the next section, toggle off the audio reuse feature as well. And you can also change the settings for each individual photo or post if you want. Also, I just gotta say, for Meta specifically, their backend is so fucking cluttered and stupid compared to other platforms that them automatically opting you in feels even more nefarious. It just really feels like they're throwing a key into a dumpster pile and they're like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And then also, I should note, this is not even the only trouble Meta's found in itself this week, because you saw in a court filing this week, Meta saying that 4 states are seeking $1.4 trillion in penalties for alleged safety and addiction abuses. And yes, trillion with a T, that number is nearly all of Meta's $1.5 trillion market cap. And so you've got Meta, unsurprisingly, not happy with all that, and they shot back writing, a sanction of that size is no analog in the history of consumer protection enforcement. The plaintiffs' outlandish calculations have no basis in fact or law. And as far as the 4 states involved, you've got California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey, and you have the lawsuit alleging that Meta has prioritized profits over the safety of kids and fueled a mental health crisis. And as far as right now, you got the trial slated for August, and as far as how the states came up with that $1.4 trillion number, according to Reuters, the states calculated the penalties by multiplying the number of violations by fines set by state law, and the violation total is based on how many teens are estimated to have been impacted by Meta's actions. And a huge thing is that this is just these 4 states. Meta is also facing lawsuits from dozens of others, mostly accusing the platform of violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And then there's more we gotta dive into in just a minute, but first, let me thank a sponsor and say, I wanna give a shout out to all you beautiful bastards who have entered our weekly $500 SeatGeek giveaways. Because today's sponsor, SeatGeek, they've doled out nearly $60,000 to you guys to get you off the couch and into the comedy club, the stadium, a concert hall since 2024, and it's been really awesome to witness. And it still blows my mind that some still haven't done it, but summer's here and the events they're stacking up. Baseball, soccer, tours for Bruno Mars, Ariana Grande, your favorite comedians. Let's get out there. It's free to enter and it takes 2 seconds. All while SeatGeek, they're the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and tickets to over 70,000 events. So sports, music, comedy, theater, you name it. Go now, look for tickets to literally anything and just simply download the app or hit the link in the description and use code PHIL10 for 10% off your purchase on SeatGeek. Then that's for new customers and old. And next, and this part is key, add that code to your SeatGeek account. That gets you the 10% off and enters you in for your chance to win the weekly $500 giveaway, no purchase required. And huge thing, for the SeatGeek vets out there, we'd never leave you out. Add code PHIL10 to your account and you're entered. Just scan that QR code or click the link below and add code PHIL10 and go make some memories. And then diving right back into the news with you, we've got to talk about this huge explosive diarrhea problem. Because right now you have a record number of people in Michigan who are suffering from a parasitic infection that causes explosive watery diarrhea. And those are the CDC's words, but Also, literally no one knows where it's coming from. So the parasite in question is called Cyclospora, and it typically spreads through produce and water that have been contaminated with human feces. In past US outbreaks, they've been caused when people consume fruits and vegetables that were irrigated with contaminated water. Though also, public health experts say that another major source can be the lack of toilets and sanitation stations at farms that grow produce. And while you've got some infected people reporting no issues at all, the CDC says that the most common symptom is that watery diarrhea with frequent and sometimes explosive bowel movements that can sometimes last for weeks. It's not your run-of-the-mill 12-hour regret after you had some midnight Taco Bell. And actually beyond that, other symptoms can include cramps, nausea, fatigue, loss of appetite, low-grade fever, and vomiting, all of which can last anywhere from several days to over a month. But the good news, I guess if you can call it that, is that these infections are rarely life-threatening. Because while you've got people with weakened immune systems more at risk, most symptoms resolve on their own, and the infection, it can typically be treated with antibiotics. And I also should note here, like, Cyclospora is not totally uncommon. It's actually a seasonal illness in the United States, with outbreaks usually taking place in the late spring and summer because the parasites favor warm, damp climates. And actually, thousands of Cyclospora illnesses are reported in the United States each year, and you had a CDC official telling reporters, even with the current outbreak, it's still unclear how unusual this year will be. But that's also kind of where the downplaying ends, because the official also noted that the national case total so far, it's 4 times higher than it was at the same time last year. And that's with us just going off of CDC and national data, which usually lags behind state reporting. For the CDC's most recent surveillance, it still says that there have only been 145 cases this year, which we know is objectively wrong because the data from states, it paints a very shitty picture. Michigan, as of yesterday, they had nearly 1,000 cases reported and at least 40 people have been hospitalized. That's the largest outbreak they've had in their entire history. They normally see around 50 cases a year. And it's by no means limited to Michigan. Northwest Ohio, which borders Michigan, they've also reported more than 500 cases. And nationally, as of mid-June, the CDC reported cases in 17 states. Though again, the national data lags way behind. It could be way worse and we just don't know it yet. That's why you've currently got public health investigations into similar illnesses in 28 other states. And one of the biggest pains is that no one really knows what's causing this surge. Right? Cyclospora, if you look into it, it is notoriously hard to track. I mean, it can't be grown in a lab, and it's often just very difficult to figure out what food the sick people had in common because it usually comes from a simple common ingredient, something like basil. And so then you're trying to figure out supply chains to both restaurants and grocery stores. And so in the meantime, you have people just kind of looking back at history and going, okay, well, what do we know? It's often connected to contaminated fruits and vegetables, including salad, greens, raspberries, basil, cilantro, green onions, snow peas, among other things. So, wash your fruits and veggies really well, though, I mean, there's still a risk with raw produce. Also, cook your vegetables when you can, and when you're eating lettuce, buy whole heads instead of pre-washed bags and remove the outer 2 or 3 leaves before washing. Well, there's a whole other conversation to be had around experts attributing the increase that we're seeing here to both global warming and better detection, and on something that maybe is almost optimistic. Health officials say that the chances of human-to-human transmission, those are low, and there's not currently any evidence that indicates that the parasite has evolved to become more infectious. So I imagine that that's probably not the most comforting information to have if you end up getting this and you're kind of stuck to a toilet bowl for maybe almost a month. But we then also have to talk about a different kind of shitstorm, the Maine Senate race. Because Graham Platner is officially out of the running after being accused of sexual assault. And now you're seeing with the race to replace him underway, you've got some right-wingers arguing that Democrats, they knowingly backed a monster while at the same time insisting that they must keep that monster in the race. And that's even as others, including none other than Donald Trump himself, having in some way come to Platner's defense, seeming to suggest that the sexual assault allegation against him could just be made up. And while of course, at least right now, it is just an allegation, but it's widely been seen as a credible one, it's only the latest that's called Platner's character into question. You've had him kind of just facing scandal after scandal since launching his candidacy last summer, including over social media posts dismissive of sexual assault, a tattoo that he had resembling a Nazi symbol, sexually explicit text messages that he sent to other women after he married in 2023, and allegations of toxic and abusive behavior by ex-girlfriends. And while his polling, it stayed pretty strong here, and high-profile supporters, including Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, stood by Platner through those controversies. On Monday, that changed after one of those ex-girlfriends came forward with a new allegation, where she claimed that Platner had not only mistreated her, but he had raped her, entered her home drunk and uninvited, and forced himself on her despite repeated objections. And so you then had a lot of the Dems who had supported him up to this point turning on him, calling on him to withdraw from the race. Right, and then the next day, you had another one of the women who had already accused Platner of getting physical with her, coming forward and claiming that he had removed condoms without consent during sex, which is actually a practice known as stealthing that's also classified as a form of sexual assault in several countries. Though Platner, throughout all this, he's denied the allegations of non-consensual behavior, and his campaign suggested that the allegations were politically motivated. But ultimately, Platner decides there's really no coming back from this, at least in this election cycle. And while several of his closest advisors reportedly pleaded with him to strike a conciliatory tone in the announcement terminating his Senate campaign, Platner reportedly told them that he'd only move forward with the announcement if he were allowed to say everything that he wanted. And it at least seems like he probably did that, because his video announcing his decision is more than 11 minutes long. And you have it starting off with Platner again denying the allegations and then blaming the establishment and the system for essentially his campaign's demise.
A corporate media system and the political establishment got to act as judge, jury, and executioner. There is a reason that this is happening now. This was the last week to try to get me off of the ballot. And that's why this is occurring. It's not the false allegations, though, that have brought us to where we are. It's the fact that they are being used by the political establishment to put structural pressure on us. We live in a political system that is not built for normal people. It is a system that is built structurally to make sure that movements like ours cannot flourish. That if they begin to succeed, they can be crushed.
And then from that, you had Platner turning his attention to the process to replace him, saying that the process needs to be reflecting the will and the values of the people that built this movement, and adding,
decisions should not be made in back rooms by people in places of political power. Party apparatchiks are not the ones to make these decisions. These decisions need to be made in the open by the people of this state, the people who got us here. This is exactly the kind of political system that everyone voted against on June 9th. And for that reason, we need to be assured that it is going to be open and democratic as we move forward.
Though with all that, right now, it's really not clear exactly how this process is going to work. All we really know right now is that the main Democratic Party, they have until July 27th at 5 p.m. to decide, and they say that they're going to do this through a nominating convention held sometime before then. And actually with that, another big thing is that before announcing his suspension, Platner reportedly told campaign staff on a call that he had, quote, asked for assurances from the Democratic Party that they will ensure a process for a replacement nominee that respects the will of the voters who voted for a different kind of politics. But then with that, you had the head of the main Democratic Party claiming that Platner's team had repeatedly reached out to them in an attempt to, quote, put their thumb on the scale of the selection process, and adding, we have repeatedly reiterated to Graham Platner's team that they have no role in determining our next Democratic nominee. And while that may be true, you also have a lot of people saying that they do need to be very careful with who they do pick, and also how they get that pick, because it would be a mistake to go with someone who doesn't represent the same values that Platner professed. And so now, what you're seeing, and by no means is this universal, you have a lot of his supporters, or maybe former supporters, they're rallying behind former state senator Troy Jackson. While a lot of people noted that his kind of most recent thing is that he had a failed bid for governor, he came third in the Democratic primary, you have many saying that he might be kind of the perfect mix of a politician and a working class populist. Right? He's won elections before. He was actually Maine Senate president for a bit, and you've had him fighting for and running on lower prescription drug prices, passing universal school meals, protecting union jobs, expanding rural health care, delivering property tax relief, safeguarding the environment, and passing laws that would put power back in the hands of working Mainers. And his most recent post after announcing that he's throwing his hat in the ring was, I'll be a vote for Medicare for all in the U.S. Senate. Susan Collins, on the other hand, recently helped advance $990 billion in Medicaid cuts so the richest Americans could get another tax break. But also, he's definitely not the only one. Or you've got other candidates, including, but not limited to, Nirav Shah, who's a former public health official who finished second in the Democratic primary for governor, and Secretary of State Shanna Bellows, who finished fourth in that primary. And then also, in the meantime, you have a lot of people, including many on the right, sort of echoing Platner, suggesting that this is the establishment, that we're getting rid of a candidate that they think is no longer viable. So you're seeing people like conservative commentator Tommy Lahren being among those comparing this to what happened with the Dems in the last presidential election, writing, well, Maine Democrats, Biden, Platner, saying the party of democracy props up shit candidates and pulls the rug and reinstalls as necessary. Platner is trash, the Democratic Party is fraudulent. Though then also with this, you had a lot of the conservative commentators also pretty much accepting the sexual assault allegation, actually arguing that the Dems were willing to accept this and Platner's other controversies if they thought they could win. With, for example, the Republicans' Twitter account posting, every Democrat that endorsed Graham Platner endorsed a rapist, and then adding in another post, Democrats are okay with predators like Graham Platner until their poll numbers are down. And you also had Laura Trump telling Fox News,
we've known who Graham Platner is for a long time, but the Democrat Party was willing to look the other way, all because they want so desperately to retain power and regain power. How can you possibly trust a party that is basically willing to lie to you and tell you that this guy is okay?
And, with all that, of course, there are a lot of people who are looking at Platner's whole history now and questioning why so many people stuck by him. But then with that, one, you have a number of people saying, hey, the first specific sexual assault allegation against Platner, it was made public on Monday. It's now Thursday. He's out of the race. But then also maybe more notably, two, your father-in-law is Donald Trump. And for the rest of the Trumplicans, the person you back every single day, you bend over backwards for to defend, is Donald Trump. A man who's in the Epstein files God knows how many times, has been accused of sexual misconduct multiple times over decades, and who's been found civilly liable for sexual abuse, which the judge clarified in practical everyday terms was rape. That's not me just throwing out a random thing. That is a judge saying it. And it is an administration that's filled with people like Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who not only has tattoos that have been linked by some to Christian nationalist and white supremacist movements, but also has been accused of sexual assault. There were those allegations detailed in a police report, which didn't lead to charges, but he later paid the woman $50,000 reportedly to stay quiet. And of course, with all this, I'll note it, in all of these cases, with the notable exception being of the case in which a court of law found Trump sexually abused a woman, those are allegations. And that actually brings us to how another whole wave of reactions have kind of been not just focused on pointing that out, but really giving weight to the idea that the accusations against Platner may be made up. And there, you had Trump, for example, saying,
It's really a question of whether or not you believe the woman. A lot of people say big falsehoods.
You've also had the investigative outlet Dropsite News reporting that the first woman who accused Platner also told Politico that she had messaged him that night that she needed her glute massage. And so you had the Dropsite News reporter arguing that omitting this relevant detail was a shocking breach of journalistic ethics. Although there, you had others quickly firing back that this sounds more like an attempt at victim blaming, with one person writing, was she also wearing a short skirt? But ultimately, that is where we are right now, right? And there's a lot that it's going to have to play out from here. And that ranges from the accusations against Platner, if more comes out, if Platner, outside of, running, defends or tries to defend himself even more. And then separate from that, who is the replacement? How are they picked? What's the public reaction to it? And I mean that both from the left and right, because as devastated as you're seeing a lot on the left right now, and there's even just like a lot of people angry at each other. On the right, something that you're seeing, though, it's not a lot on the surface. It's kind of like reporting about behind the scenes. They're fucking furious. So much money and time has been spent on digging up stuff on Graham Platner, getting ready to kind of destroy him before November. And now you have a number of them kind of seeing there being a risk of what if someone copy pastes Platner's public policy, but they don't have all the baggage. And so seemingly one of the big things we're going to be focusing on right now is how the Democrats get the nominee. Right, that's going to be a big part of the make or break in this situation. But for now, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. And then for your final block today, I've got more news you need to know, starting with the whole Nolan Wells situation. Because to start, you've got deleted text messages, an argument on the water, and a judge that's defending her son from accusations. And all of this just blowing up since Nolan Wells' body was found earlier this week. And now you've got Ben Crump, the same lawyer who fought for George Floyd and Trayvon Martin, stepping in because Wells' family says that there are too many unanswered questions. Got them claiming that there is nothing right about this case.
You're trying to tell us just accept this an accident and sweep it under the rug. His mother, Christine, his father, Elmo, say, no, they will not allow that to happen.
With all these questions and suspicion, you got a lot of people pointing fingers at Wells' friends, asking why they left him behind on the island in the first place. And with one of the guys that he was with being the son of a judge in the area, she then went to Facebook to deny rumors about their involvement in all this, saying no one in our family is trying in any way to impede with the investigation. And you had her claiming the kids had to leave the island that day because of an issue with their boat, and that Wells decided to stay and catch a ride with another group of friends. But then you also had Crump saying that Wells had a conversation with a girl who apparently had a different story.
They are conflicting. She's saying he went and got on the boat. They saying he didn't get on the boat. So which is it? And all we know is Nolan is dead.
And then with that, you've also got authorities asking for more information about a video that's been going around from that day, where we can hear what sounds like people arguing in the background. So right now, no one's confirmed if Wells was involved in that. But then on top of those issues, you're seeing some concerns with Wells' phone, making things even more complicated for the family.
They're saying messages that were deleted from his cell phone, so they want to try to dot every I and cross every T. They're trying to look at what is that about. There's so many inconsistencies going on.
And also, under all of this, you're seeing the issue of race.
The family has some concerns about the state of Mississippi doing an investigation of the death of a young black man where young white students may be looked at as having some culpability.
And when you look online, you're seeing a lot of people having those similar concerns, saying, I absolutely do not believe it was an accident. There should be a completely independent investigation because I do not trust Mississippi at all. And he was left behind on a Mississippi island. We love to preach equality until a black boy is the only one in the group, and then it's silent suspicion and accidents. And you now have Crump saying that they're flying the body to DC for an independent autopsy. And he's hoping that they're gonna get results back pretty soon. So for now, the case is to be continued. And then also in the news, you should know about Marsha Blackburn and her campaign ad that has a lot of people calling it blatantly racist, ignorant, and red scare mongering garbage.
How hard am I gonna crack down on China? Well, here's a clue.
Marsha Blackburn worked with President Trump to take on communist China.
It doesn't take a fortune cookie to figure it out. Here in Tennessee, we're going to stop communist China and protect Tennessee land.
Right, and Blackburn, if you're fortunate enough not to know, is a U.S. Senator out of Tennessee, and this year, she's running for governor. Right, and you had her campaign just getting $1 million boost in ads from the Tennessee Freedom Fund PAC, and apparently this was her first order of business with that money. With an ad that talks about her standing with Trump and hunting down communists, and the backlash we've seen has been pretty bad. Starting with, the imagery behind all this, people finding it just absolutely unironically hilarious. First, you have them pointing out that fortune cookies really aren't actually much of a thing in China, so that's really not helping her point. And the soy sauce on the table, it looks a lot like Kikkoman brand, which is Japanese. Also, the waving cat at the end, that's Japanese as well. And among other things, it had people saying things like some TV ads are subtle and some, well, hey, no one said racists were smart. And while, hey, yes, there is a lot to make fun of here, I do need to say, there is an impact behind these types of ads. One, unfortunately, there's a group of people out here that will just gobble this up like slop. And two, we saw violence against Asians on the rise following COVID when the president said, this is a China virus. And the anti-immigration rhetoric and the legislation that he's been pushing even more in his second term, that's not helping the problem either. And so despite, how ridiculous and clownish a lot of these people are and what they do can be, we also then need to appreciate and acknowledge that ads like this, they fuel an issue that can lead to very real harm in communities across the country. But then last up in the news for you today, we got an update on the Charlie Kirk case, right? Because you have his family reportedly asking for the release of video footage and other evidence against Tyler Robinson in the case to be made public. And you have their attorneys saying they believe strongly that if the evidence is being admitted in this preliminary hearing, it should be made public for the world to see. And adding that to not be transparent here, to not be open, to not let the world see what happened will create doubt and distrust in the judicial system. And notably, this evidence would include an interview with Robinson's roommate, Lance Twiggs, who was first interviewed back in September and eventually granted use immunity. But then with this, you've got Robinson's defense attorney arguing that making the interview public could threaten his right to a fair trial. And he also had the same concern about Discord chats and text messages that would come out with that as well, saying prosecutors could frame it all as a confession, although he claims that they're just statements made by an individual. But then you have the judge on the case actually ordering prosecutors to prepare an edited version of the interview that, quote, contains only the excerpts he is considering publishing. And with that, they actually played parts of the interview in court earlier today. They also exposed some Discord messages that Robinson sent to friends, along with other communications that he had with Twiggs. And most of that's already made its way to the public, but as far as, what else may come out, we still aren't sure. And really, whatever happens here, it's going to be big, both for the court of public opinion about what's happening online and in the real world. And then also, how does that impact the actual court case moving forward? But hey, that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is the end of your Thursday show. Thank you for watching. I got more you can watch right here. You can click or tap. I got links in the description as well. My name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here next time.